After he so selflessly cut short his Christmas vacation in Hawaii, President Obama is now back in Washington for a last-minute fight over the so-called looming fiscal cliff. But as lawmakers from both sides of the aisle say there is no deal in sight, and it makes us wonder, what exactly has President Obama been doing, and why hasn't he accomplished anything up to this point? Now, should the president have jetted off for a tropical vacation and a little golf and R&R? Joining me now with reaction, Fox News contributor, the one and only Charles Krauthammer. Charles, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Thank you very much. You too.
All right, let's look at the politics of this, Charles. We saw what happened with the Plan B. The Senate has not passed a budget in over 1,300 days. The president goes off 18 hours on the golf course, 20 hours in the air. How do you view this politically, and should Republicans even consider that?
Well, I don't begrudge him his holiday. I do begrudge what he's done in these fiscal cliff talks. It's been very clear from the beginning that he had no intention to solve the fiscal issues. He's been using this, and I must say with great skill and ruthless skill and success, to fracture and basically shatter the Republican opposition. The only, redoubt of the opposition is the House. And his objective from the very beginning was to break the will of the Republicans in the House and to create an internal civil war. And he's done that. How did he do it? By always insisting from day one after the election that Republicans had to raise rates. There's no reason at all to get the revenue he needed, and that the Speaker was offering him, that you had to raise rates. Obama himself, as you know, said last July 2011, that you could get $1.2 trillion by eliminating loopholes, which is exactly what Republicans offered him. So why did he insist on the rates? He said that is what he'll insist upon, and that was the ultimatum. He did that because he knew it would create a crisis among the Republicans, and it did. So right up until now, Obama has what he wanted, which was a partisan political success. He's been less worried about the fiscal issue for two reasons. Number one, he does not care about debt. He hasn't in the 4 years. And number two, he thinks he's a political winner if we go over the cliff. He thinks he's holding all the cards.
All right, Charles, let me agree with one point. You used the term, and I'll concede that's the perfect term, ruthless skill. But as Bob Woodward pointed out when he wrote this book about the grand bargain negotiations, it's not going to be looked at through this historical prism as the Boehner era. This is the Obama era. And if economists are right, and things economically don't go well for the country, doesn't the president have to worry about that legacy of his?
I agree with you entirely. I have argued from the beginning that Republicans should hold out, that they had more strength than they thought, that Obama wasn't holding all the cards. I think he has the advantage, obviously, because Republicans in all the polls are the ones who will take the blame. But nonetheless, the larger issue, if you're Obama, is not who's popular or who's not. He's won his last election. That doesn't matter anymore. What Obama cares about, should care about, and does care about is his legacy. And if you go over the cliff, he may get a bump temporarily and the Republicans will take a hit. But his legacy is going to be his second term. And if he wrecks the economy, as he would, by not being able to remedy the consequences of going over the cliff, then he's going to have a failed second term, and history will remember him as a failed president. So I think he's over it. Now, what he probably thinks is he can go over the cliff, the Republicans will take a hit, he'll have public opinion behind him, and then he can undo the damage one issue at a time by getting a reduction, by a return of the majority of the Bush tax rates, extending unemployment, whatever else he wants to do. He can get that one piece of legislation at a time so that he won't suffer the consequence of a second recession of 9% unemployment. So I think that's his calculation. But I do think that he's putting a lot in jeopardy. If we go over the cliff, there's going to be a very shaky response, probably from Wall Street. Consumer confidence is going to be hit. He could be damaged more economically, and the country would, than I think he imagines. So I think he could be overplaying his hand. I think he's been doing that in terms of the fiscal issue.
I also think, Charles, is one more example of him rigidly clinging to this radical ideology of his. Let me go to the Republican side of this, because I've been saying the same thing. I think the Republicans from the beginning have had a much stronger hand than they even knew. Now, of course, with the debt ceiling being reached again, they have the power of the purse. The question for them is, what is in their best interest politically? Is it in their best interest to stand on their principle, which I would argue they'll be rewarded for, or is it better for them to capitulate? And from what I hear, there are a lot of Republicans that will take any deal that Obama gives them because they're scared to death.
Well, I think the Republicans will surely have a much stronger hand, assuming we go over the cliff, assuming Obama stays very hardline and offers only humiliating conditions, and the Republicans resist or do nothing, then we go over the cliff. Then I think you're right. The Republicans have a pretty strong hand because Obama then has to worry about the debt ceiling. Now, with bravado, he says, oh, that's a game I want to play. He has to play. He's the president. He's responsible for the full faith and credit of the United States. And he's got Republicans in charge of the House. That's the will of the people. That's the result of an election. And they have a mandate as much as he does. He can't walk away and say, I'm not interested in negotiating. He's going to have to. He may not like it, but he'll have to. And that's where the Republicans will have, I think, a stronger hand. So I think if you don't cave now and you hang on, we'll be in a position, the Republicans will be in a position in the next month or two. I think we're going to really hit the wall on the debt ceiling probably the end of February, beginning of March. And that's when I think they're going to have the upper hand, or at least an equal hand.
As long as they don't give that away in these negotiations. Charles Krauthammer, Happy New Year, my friend. Good to see you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. You too.